Hello there, this is Magenta Pixie speaking. I would like to share with you my response to a question I received a couple of days ago. And the question is, Magenta, can an individual be an ambassador or an emissary for an extraterrestrial or angelic race? Therefore, speaking on behalf of that race. So this is a really good question, and really to respond to this is quite tricky, as it would depend on the individual's interpretation of the word ambassador or emissary, and as they mean similar things. Let's just go with the word ambassador. So yes, an individual may use the term ambassador, but what do they mean by that term? I'm feeling that perhaps the word representative or speaker may be more appropriate. So unless you know the individual's interpretation of the word, it's difficult to say if they are genuine in what they present to you, as using the term ambassador or emissary suggests they speak on behalf of a group, a race, a community, or indeed an entire race or angelic race. Now, whilst it is untrue that only one person on earth would ever be appointed to speak on behalf of a race of beings or an individual being, or whether you wish to call that extraterrestrial or angelic, these terms, extraterrestrial and angelic, have themselves multiple meanings and different interpretations, but that's a whole other subject. So no, one individual wouldn't be chosen to speak on behalf of a group, a collective, or one being other than themselves. But it is true that multiple souls may speak on behalf of a community, a construct, a structure, a planetary system, however you want to put that. It is true that multiple souls may speak for that community, that group. Now, with the latter, as in multiple souls, ambassador may not be the right term to use, as it might be interpreted as an ego presentation. And it might be that, but also it just simply might not be the best use of that term, and there may not be any ego involved. So if an individual is channeling or communicating telepathically, let's say, with a being of a different race or a dimensional vibration, then it's paramount to find the most aligned terminology one can as that channel or conduit in order to convey the message received most accurately to others. So you stand as the medium, and as you stand as that medium between one structure and another, you are an interpreter. And so choosing the most aligned terminology is crucial. It's paramount. Otherwise, misunderstanding can occur. So the higher or alternate dimensional being will, through key locational telepathic transference, and there are other means of communication as well, but let's just look at the higher dimensional being, through key locational telepathic transference, which is a telepathy that targets a specific point of reference coming from a particular specific point of reference. These higher dimensional beings, they communicate with frequency. They don't communicate with words. They communicate with frequency and tone. And the channel or the receiver then interprets these words. And this may come through in multiple different ways: words, pictures, songs, poetry, visuals. And the channel or receiver or the conduit has to interpret that frequency into whichever medium they're using to convey that higher frequency. And some conduits and channels are able to interpret this into words and are able to do this very quickly. So it feels as though the angelic being or the extraterrestrial or the collective is speaking actual words as they do that translation so fast. So, if an individual, a conduit, a channel, if they are told by their source that they are an ambassador for their planet, as in the planet that the extraterrestrial resides upon, or that they're an ambassador for a certain dimension, then it's one of three things going on here. Either they're in communication with a trickster spirit that's been attracted through their own ego, so you could interpret that as the ego isn't balanced when they're making that communication, or they're making the whole thing up. There's no contact going on, and it's all deliberately made up for various reasons. Or they've interpreted the frequency of the message that conveys their ability to translate their messages to others as ambassador, whereas ambassador may or may not be the correct term. The Nine did use the term ambassador at one point to describe an individual, or rather what the individual is doing, and I will come to that in a minute. But ambassador is usually taken to mean the only spokesperson, and it's rarely presented that there are multiple. So it may be that that is a very close term, but it's not the best use of the translation of that frequency. It could be that a different word is more appropriate. So that third option, where an individual is simply not choosing the best word to describe that frequency, that third option here is coming from a genuine individual. Yet you can also be hearing the same terms coming from the distorted individual, the ego consciousness, and also the fraudster, the individual who's making it all up. So whilst I can best respond to your question by saying no individual speaks on behalf of a planetary race or a dimensional realm or a world, it's possible that the word is a mistranslation of energy. So how do you know if someone using these terms is genuine? As in, really in contact with a benevolent higher being? Well, you look at their energy fields, you look at their frequency, you look at their chakra system. You don't just look at the words they're saying or the claims they're making. Look at their light. Feel the presentation of their heart. And this will show you if they're genuine or not. And this is the only way to discover what someone is, how someone is. Are they genuine? Are they real? Regardless of whether they're a channel or whatever walk of life they're in. It's not about who they mix with, what parties they attend, who they had their photograph taken with, what they're even saying or what they appear to be doing, or the fact that they might make promises that they then don't appear to be fulfilling. It could be multiple things. If you judge someone on that, that's just one small tiny piece of the puzzle, and it's all coming from the third dimension. The only way to truly know is to look at the energy fields, the chakra system, the light quotient, the frequency, the matrix of that individual, and to feel, to see and to feel. It's the only way. And even then, there can be false screens that you need to move through. But if you are able to move through these false screens and get right to the core of that individual, you will know if they are genuine and authentic or not. So when an individual is a channel or a conduit, the translation they interpret will also be based on their own knowledge and awareness, their own experiences, and their openness to receive. If they've received some decent training, then they will know how to be objective. And within that training, they'll be able to move into a neutrality, allowing them to bring forward even higher and faster frequency with far less distortion. And also if they've received some kind of training on the use of words, either creatively, creative writing, poetry, drama, singing, or through a more technical understanding, like science or technology, reading more non-fiction material, so non-creative reading, or through the study of linguistics, any kind of study of terminology and words, then they will have a better chance at aligning the frequencies they receive to the appropriate terminology when they're delivering their message. So receiving this type of message goes through several filters. So if you hear someone deliver a message that says, "I'm speaking on behalf of the angelic realm," or a planetary system, or a star, or a dimensional world, "and I have been entrusted to deliver their message as the only chosen representative for that race." Now, if you hear that, you might feel like switching off completely and listening to someone else. This presentation, of course, is completely untrue and false. But does the messenger believe it's true? And if the messenger does believe it's true, is that through distortion, trickery, ego? Or is this simply not the best use of terminology within the translation, as in a different personal opinion or perspective as to what that word ambassador means, or similar messages that are conveying this, representative? So what is the reason the messenger believes it's true? Well, the truth here is that every single starseed, every single light worker is, if you will, an ambassador or an emissary. Every single one. There isn't one person, "Oh, they're an ambassador, they're an emissary, and all these people listening to them are not." That is false. Everyone's an ambassador when they begin to wake up. Why? Because they're ambassadors for multidimensionality itself, for higher thinking, fifth dimensional reality, for the teaching of ascension and all that they know within that and all that goes with that path. However, few starseeds will use this term, ambassador, because it tends to suggest that you are the only one. You are the only one receiving this. And it's all awakened individuals that are ambassadors or emissaries. Now, this may be a belief system coming from ego, but it may also simply be a misunderstanding of representatives of light, as in the awakening occurs and you believe you are the only one. And when you look around at all the people around you and they're all still asleep and they don't feel what you feel and they don't know what you know, it's very easy to believe that you are chosen and that you are special. However, the truth is they have not woken up yet and you have. And in that respect, you are special, but they will be just as special when they wake up. And it's very important for a conduit or a channel to understand this, that they are part of a collective. They are one of many. And any teacher putting themselves above everyone else is out of balance. So this belief system that the individual may hold, coming either from ego or a misunderstanding of what representatives of light are, is due to the fact that the journey feels so individual. And it is, of course, extremely individual. The other perspective here is that this is a collective journey. Each starseed moving through a personal and individual process at the same time as multiple other starseeds going through the same process. So if you want to use the term ambassador, or if you've been given the term ambassador from your source, then it needs to be used in the context that there are many, not one. And if you are told by your source that you are the only ambassador, then you need to question that source. Ask that source why they are saying that. How do they mean that? Are they meaning that in the term that you are the only soul in existence? Because that is also a true perspective. So where is your source coming from when they use this term? Or is your source able to present to you the frequency and you realize that you are the interpreter of that? Could you therefore choose a more aligned word? And you can ask your source. You can actually say, what do you mean by this frequency? which word best conveys the frequency you are presenting, this word or that word. And your source, if it's genuine and truly of the higher light, your source will assist you and train you in interpretation of their message. So when it comes to the term ambassador, it's not a term the Nine have necessarily used with me or to explain to me who I am to them and what my role is. I don't recall them using that term. However, they did use this term to me on one occasion to explain the role of another soul. And this was quite specific, and the way they used this term, or the way they presented this frequency, and I interpreted that frequency as ambassador, holds a slightly different meaning. What actually the situation was, someone I knew many years ago passed over, so transitioned, prior to reaching 50 years old. So he transitioned very young. And a few years after his transition, I met him in an out-of-body experience. You could also call this astral travel, but I was in an out-of-body experience and I met him. And we had a long conversation about how he was doing and what his role was and things that he had learned. And he taught me a lot, actually, even though this individual was in the fourth dimension. He was actually residing within a fourth dimensional construct, which is, if you will, a sub-reality within the vibrational octave that the Nine refer to as the fourth dimension. There are multiple sub-realities. Some are created for collectives, so it's a collective mind, and others are completely individual just for that one soul. This was a collective sub-reality. So there are multiple domains and octaves and spaces, layers and harmonics within this fourth dimensional realm. It is an infinite realm, or rather, it's not infinite, actually, the way that the fifth dimension is, but it is vast, let's say. It is very vast. Now, the Nine used the term ambassador to explain the role of this soul. This soul who'd passed over had become an ambassador. And they actually used the term a fourth dimensional ambassador, and that there were several of them, and he was one of them. But they used this term in a very different way to how most might perceive it. What they meant when they said he was an ambassador was that this particular soul was ready to move on to the next stage of his soul's journey, as into a new octave, a new harmonic within the fourth dimensional construct. The domain he existed within at the time I met him in the out-of-body experience was described as a domain of rehabilitation or recalibration or rest, recuperation and healing. That's what this domain was, but it was for specific types of souls. So not all souls went to this place, but it was for newly passed over souls who had been through certain, let's say, intense experiences in their physical life. And he had advanced beyond this domain now. He was ready to move on to the next level within this subdomain world in the fourth dimension. He was delivering a service, however, in that rehabilitation domain. So he had been able to access the rehabilitation or healing there. And now he was delivering a service to others. So by choosing to stay behind, if you will, to stay in a dimension that he had advanced beyond, to stay behind and not advance his own path, instead remaining within a lower vibrational field than he aligned with, he became an ambassador for that field. This is what the Nine mean when they use the term ambassador, and the Nine referred to him as a fourth dimensional ambassador. And if you go to my YouTube channel and you type in on the search fourth dimensional ambassador on my YouTube channel, you will find this video. So this is quite a different use of the term, and if you apply this meaning to starseeds, you will see therefore that every starseed is an ambassador, simply by the virtue of them having progressed beyond the frequencies of the third dimensional realm, yet they stay behind to assist the whole or the collective. So if someone says they are an ambassador, if you hear a speaker or a teacher say they are an ambassador, before dismissing that person as false or lying or in ego, one needs to move into interpretation and discernment if they want to truly know where that person is coming from. It is not enough to just put out a blanket dismissal to every spiritual teacher using this term. Oh, they're lying. That's false. That's fake. They're in ego. And just dismiss them entirely. Now, it may well be that the majority are that. But if you actually take each speaker on an individual merit rather than a blanket dismissal, so you throw the baby out with the bathwater, let's say, if you actually look at each individual using these terms, if you want to do that, I mean, you may not feel it's necessary for you, but if you were to do that, you may find some gems, you may find some individuals using these terms who are actually fantastic teachers. They're using this term potentially to explain it in the way the Nine explained it. They may even be saying in their further discourse, rather than just listening to them say one sentence, if you actually listen to more of what they're saying, they may use in that discourse the truth that all starseeds are ambassadors. Anyone who has awakened is an ambassador. So I hope that's helped explain, and I know that's quite a lengthy response to your question, but it's not, as I said, it's a tricky question to answer. It's not just a yes or no answer. So therefore, the answer to your question, can an individual be an ambassador for an extraterrestrial race or an angelic collective or a planetary system? The answer is both yes and no. Thank you so much for listening. I'll be back soon with more videos. Bye. I am delighted to announce that the first 3 books of my Matrix Mastery teachings are now available, collected into a single omnibus edition. This information within these 3 books, making up the Matrix Mastery Omnibus, holds key codes, maps, and coordinates for anyone moving into awareness, activation, and the knowing that there is far more to the human reality on Earth than just the physical plane. As the starseeds on Earth go through the process of DNA reconstruction and regrouping of cosmic multidimensional memory, the significant codex within each transmission is downloaded to the reader directly from their own monadic avatar self. Multiple flame letter memory codes are utilized, including the Rose, the Chalice, the Golden Stargate, Atlantis, Crystalline Light, Excalibur, the Sword of Truth, the Dragon, the Emerald Flame, and all that encompasses the holographic nature of reality. These codes are held within the most sacred twin pillars of light, your heart and your mind. The Matrix Mastery Omnibus, available now